There we go. All right. Hi, we're joined online via Zoom, and it's a first for us here at the ACM with the folk in Gauteng at Walk Through the Bible, and also the folk in KwaZulu-Natal, if I'm not mistaken, from Focus on the Family. Can we hear from the Gauteng folk? Can you just stand up and give us a massive wave and a howdy, if you don't mind? We see the hands waving. There we go. There we go. Oh, lovely. So good, and welcome. And thank you so much to everybody. We know Gauteng traffic is hectic as we see some people pouring in there. Don't worry, you haven't missed anything too important yet. The $1 million prize has already been given away. So sorry that you were late. And then from KwaZulu-Natal, who do we have in the house at KwaZulu-Natal? I see a string of people. There we go. Some hands going up. Love it. Love it to bits. Welcome, welcome, and thank you so much. And then a big thank you also to Natalie. She is administration for the ACM, and she has really put in a lot of work and effort into today's event. So just a quick run through of how it's going to work, as we want to be finished by 12:30 at the latest. And so with regard to that, the schedule is fairly straightforward. Seth is going to be joining us also via Zoom, and Seth is going to talk to us. He's got a plenary for us, a very, very interesting topic for us to discuss. And then at the end, from each venue, so from Gauteng, KwaZulu-Natal, and here in Cape Town, we are going to allow one question. So as you're listening to Seth, perhaps you have a question. Maybe you just want to jot it down and pass it to me. I'll be sitting here in the front. Then we can possibly just get you to ask your question to Seth at the end of Seth's plenary. Then in terms of just after that, we'll have some light eats. We've got a light lunch prepared for you, so don't rush away, please. Vegetarian and non-vegetarian. And there will be some juice as well at lunchtime, some more coffee and tea for those who would like some. And then we're going to sit and discuss what we just listened to. And the whole idea for there is that we can hear and put it into our personal organization's context. And I think that's just so, so important. So I believe now it's time for me to introduce you to our speaker, Seth Naicker, born and raised in beautiful South Africa, and is currently managing India Afrique training and development. Seth has consulted for various massive companies, including Adcock Ingram, Standard Bank, VW South Africa, and others, just to name a few. Seth has completed his master's in organizational leadership. And what an incredible guy. We had the privilege of just engaging with him prior to this event, and really fantastic to be connected with you, Seth. Thank you so much. He's passionate about social change and transformation, health and community and organizational development. Seth has worked in several spheres: corporate, nonprofit, religious, educational, etc., doing training and a lot more. And in every sphere, Seth has been blessed to engage his work with a core focus on inclusivity, diversity, transformation, and reconciliation. And I think we desperately need that in our country at such a time. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Seth Naicker, our speaker for the morning. Thank you so much, Seth.
Hello, Jonathan, and everyone else in all the other venues. I want to be in solidarity with you for a while because I can see some of you are masked. And right at the get-go, because it is a networking event, more than just that which I say, I'd like you all to please stand up with me. And if we can get the cameras directed in the direction of people, and if you can come a bit closer. Can everyone hear me? I've turned my view to gallery view, so Natalie can turn on her video as well. And Kyla Brits, if you're willing, please turn on your video as well. And if I can ask you to unmute, if there's a host in every center from the 3 venues, please unmute your mics. And Kyla, you can unmute yourself as well, because Kyla's there. And Cape Town, who's in Cape Town? Can you unmute there in Cape Town? And David is about to unmute. And Lynette, or Lynn, with the Gautengelangers there. How's the Gauteng people doing? Okay, good. And Graham, can you unmute over down there? Where is Graham, Jonathan?
I beg your pardon?
Where's Graham Schnell? Which part of the country are we coming in? Yes, Graham, please unmute your mic.
KwaZulu-Natal, I believe.
Yes, please ask him to unmute if somebody can communicate with him. Unmute your mic there.
Graham.
Awesome, awesome. So whoever else is in the room with him, mute so that we can hear the people. Jonathan, you mute and have Graham unmute. David, can you unmute? Okay, so I'd like you all to get ready with us. Cape Town, it's a networking exercise, and I'd like you to feel the rhythm. So if we can please get you all to warm up your fingertips, the first one, and I'm going to get you with a nice love splash. So warm up your fingertips, everybody. Warm it up nicely. And then you've already greeted some people. Don't splash them like, you know, you're throwing them away, but kind of just say to them, hey, it's good to have you here. Kind of just splash them with a dose of love. Are you ready? 1, 2, 3, and boom. And then if you can, wherever you're at, if you can just bow your knees a little bit or bend a bit towards the direction of the cameras. And everybody, if you can look up here at the camera. So in Cape Town, there's some of you that are quite tall. Can you just take a little bit of a 3-degree bend? Cape Town, bend, yeah, just a little bit. The gentleman up front with the black shirt, just take a little bit of a bend. Yeah, take a little bit of a bend. Yeah, bend down just a bit. Crouch, yeah, there we go. Now look up at the camera and everybody say, yeah, yeah. Yeah. Let's try that again. 1, 2, 3. Are you ready, everyone? Let me hear you say, yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah. Okay, good stuff. Good stuff. Good stuff. Good stuff. The last one is just to really set it in motion, and it's to give you some good vibrations. We want to acknowledge you all for being here today. It's my favorite activity. If I'd been there with you in person, we would have rolled this out a lot longer. But it's called a 2 stomps, 2 claps, 2 snaps with a woo! Are you ready? Gauteng, are you ready? Can I see you go ready with your hands up in the air? Okay, good stuff. Gauteng looks like they're ready. Let's check. Cape Town, are you ready? Cape Town looks like they're ready. KZN, I can see the back of your heads. Are you ready? There they go. There they go. So it's called a 2 stomps, 2 claps, 2 snaps with a woo. Remember, 1 event in 3 venues. Are you ready, everybody? I'm counting you down. 1, 2, 3, and woo! Looks beautiful. Let's do it one more time. You got it now. 1, 2, 3, and woo! Awesome stuff. You may be seated, everyone. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And you can give yourselves a round of applause as well. People that are operating their Zoom devices, they can at this time maybe turn it on to the speaker view if that's helpful to you. And I just want to say what a great privilege it is this morning to be with you all. I would normally be coming to you from LA, not Los Angeles, Lower Alberton, but I'm also away with my family in KwaZulu-Natal. So the KwaZulu-Natalers in the house, yeah to you all. And it's so awesome being with you. A part of that CV, thank you, Jonathan, for the introduction. I must honor today the organization of Heartlines, because I'm associated to them and work with them. And I think in many ways, they are connected with you all as well. For those of you that are in the room today, you are in some way, shape, form, and fashion connected to media industries, a part of the Association of Christian Media in South Africa. And it's really a great honor for me to be with you and for us to be together. By way of us sharing together, let me capture our imaginations or bring our attention and focus by taking you to a screen share. And right here, I hope that you all can see this. And maybe if someone that's close by, if you've got your, can I get a thumbs up there from Gauteng? Is the visual coming through? And is the audio all happening? Awesome. So if you're taking some notes or you're writing on your Samsung notepads, it's helpful because in a way, it's a talk, it's motivational, but part of it is hopefully a learning session. And like Jonathan said, in your networking spacing after this, you're going to get to discuss a little bit further. I've got two pictures that's up on the screen to capture this title short, if you like, Influencing Communities Positively to Bring Healing and Transformation. I'm going to say that again. Influencing communities positively to bring healing and transformation. Right here at the get-go, I'm going to bring two stories. The one is to the left of my screen, and that's a story called #The Art of Reconciliation. It was a project that we launched in Dubuque, Iowa, with a community of folk that wanted to be really unusually focused and intentional on crossing the racial divides and getting their family and their friends and getting their community to work together. So as we think about it, I'd like you to all, for a moment, think about a place that is in turmoil, a place that is in unrest. This space on the left, where you can see some kind of orange artwork and so on, Dubuque, Iowa, about 20 years ago had active folk that would have declared without apologizing that they were part of the KKK, the Ku Klux Klan. They even had some cross burnings. And when we were called to do some work around communities for justice and positive change, I said, why not begin an effort that would allow us to put to test our thoughts and ideas. So on the left, there's that image. And we launched this project, The Art of Reconciliation, bringing people together across the lines of race, class, and gender. To the right of you, and I hope you like this image, I don't know what you'd say it is. Maybe for some of you, I've had different folk when they were live with me and we tested this picture. Some people said it looks like it's a bit way off. It's not really poignant and pointed well. Well, it's the artwork of my daughter, and she calls it Future City. Future City. And I hope you appreciate it today. But as I draw your attention to the right side of the screen, Future City, I'd like you to also be aware of that we call, when we think about our communities, to think about what kind of future do we want? What kind of future are we interested in? What kind of future are we willing to work for and live for and make happen? Well, just as I continue, I just want to check with Jonathan. Jonathan, is all the audio and the visual working well? Awesome. Cape Town, Durban, and Johannesburg or Gauteng, KwaZulu-Natal, can you guys hear me? Can I just get you waving in the air if all's going good? So right there is just a tone setter, influencing communities positively to bring healing and transformation. Well, a few months ago in July, we had some unrest in our country. And when we think about the definition, some folk would say, well, that was unrest that just came up in that moment, in that time. But actually, look at the definition of unrest. Think about it with me now. Definition, a disturbed or uneasy state, turmoil. Now, there possibly was in July, around about that middle of July, unrest that was sparked in that moment. But I'd like us all to be aware that unrest has been around for a while, if you think upon it just by the way of definition, a disturbed or uneasy state. Today, as we gather, for some of us in this hybrid event, some of us that are there physically, some of us that are online, we've been through 600 somewhat days of COVID-19, a global pandemic. There's been unrest in the atmosphere. I hope that you would be able to say yeah to that. Not only was it unrest in our minds or as a concept, but it is and was and still is unrest that has really wrecked our humanity. We've lost loved ones, we've lost people. So think upon unrest and a state of unrest in broader terms than just what happened in our country in July. However, it might have exacerbated the unrest. And many of us have heard that time in and time out, the exacerbation of poverty, the exacerbation of gender-based violence. This is some of the stuff that we've had to face over the last 2 years. Not to say that it wasn't there, but through COVID-19, some of the global pandemic and what we face in our country, we've seen a situation of unrest. I've selected a video as media associations, and I hope that the video in some ways will shock us, but in other ways will motivate us. And it is an international video because it's always important to hear and think about what other people are saying about us in our own context from another point of view. So check this out by a video snippet provided to us by NBC News.
Protests in South Africa have led to widespread damage across the country. The demonstrations come after former President Jacob Zuma was jailed. NBC News foreign correspondent Kelly Kobaya joins us now for a closer look. Kelly, I know you're on the ground there. What can you tell us?
Well, Savannah, it's still pretty tense here in South Africa, across the country, really. Today, there were more protests and more looting and violence in some parts of the country overnight. More businesses destroyed. This mall you see here is just one of hundreds that have been looted and destroyed over the past several days. You can see people here now trying to clean up and salvage what they can. Frankly, there's not much to salvage. There's a lot of pent-up anger in South Africa right now, fueled by politics, poverty, and the pandemic.
This morning, America's most important ally in Africa, rocked by historic, sweeping and dangerous protests, fires and looting. Tensions boiling in South Africa, prompting protests on a scale not seen in nearly 3 decades. Since the end of the racist regime of minority rule known as apartheid, protests that had implications around the world. More than 100 people killed, thousands arrested, windows smashed, and in some cases, businesses burned to the ground. In a dramatic moment captured on cell phone video, a toddler tossed and saved from a burning building torched by rioters. These demonstrations started after the arrest of former President Jacob Zuma, who's facing a sweeping corruption investigation. Even now, half of South Africa's population lives below the poverty line, and unemployment is at nearly 33%. All of that compounded over the past year by the pandemic. Now, some business owners struggling to figure out how they'll recover.
We know the rate of unemployment is very high, but when we do things like this, then it becomes more higher.
In Washington, the White House says it supports a solution that respects human rights and brings a peaceful resolution to the ongoing unrest.
We certainly track and watch closely and certainly have concerns about unrest that we see in the streets in South Africa.
And another effect we've seen of the past several days of looting, problems getting food, fuel, and even medicine in some cases. There are long lines for food and fuel in parts of the country today. And the government, saying that they will not stand for anarchy and chaos on the streets, has now asked to deploy some 25,000 troops to restore calm. Savannah, the first 10,000 or so are already on the streets.
All right, Kelly Kobaya, stay safe. Thank you.
Well, thank you for watching with me. And in some way, I don't mean to put more pressure in the room, but these are some of the pressurizing circumstances that we have known, that we have seen. And I'd like us to keep in context some of that which we are seeing is from the specific moment, July onwards, but some of it that we are seeing is linked to the history or the history or the story that's coming from our past, not just his story, but her story. And as we think about it, as folk that are in the industry of media, are using platforms, are using radio, I don't know which other kind of industries you may be linked to around media today, but think about the reality of how we share the news, what gets shared in such a time as this, and also the fact that we may be living in some of the worst of the times, but also in some of the best of the times. And as you watch that video, my mind was really attracted to, yes, like many of us, we were captured by the disaster, the destruction, the turmoil, but I also was captured by this saving of a young child. In the midst of the worst of times, people can do some amazing, beautiful works of kindness. And I'd like you to work with that thought today, that as we think about influencing communities, Hey, Kyla, are you still there? Apologies for that. Are we back? So I think as I cut away, if I may, and if Joburg that can let me know, I said that may sound quite ironic, and then it cut out, right, Kyla? Was that roundabout where you had me cut out? Okay, good. KwaZulu-Natal, you still there? Good stuff. Cape Town, you still in the house? And Joburgers, Gauteng, are you there? So anyway, that's the context. As we think about influencing our communities, we're doing our work in the best of times and in many times at the worst of times. However, it's not just one kind of time. And I'd like to say this to you, that we need to depict already at the get-go, right here, right now, what will we make our focus? It's not all that bad, but it's not all that good. It's not all that good, but it's also not all that bad. Are you with me this morning? So as we dive deeper and think about how we can make our impact, I would like you to think about your story, who you are, where you come from. One of our own country writers in our own context, and for some of us, it seems quite troublesome to think about him, because many have written him off, if you like, as one that was totally without faith. But Steve Biko, at the earliest of his writings, he actually wrote to Christian students all across South Africa, many of which seem to have gone into media in and around the time of the 70s. Some folk, either by way of influence or the work they decided to do. Many folk that got access to Biko in and around the 70s or even the late 60s heard about his voicing towards Christian students. Now, for those of you that carry your faith with you as a part of the Association of Christian Media and take that seriously, Biko's work around consciousness is quite interesting, because a lot of his work was for people to consider who they are and the best of who they are and the beauty of who they are. Now, I don't know about you, but sometimes as a dad, I don't feel so beautiful, especially when my 6-year-old son lets me know, hey, daddy, I'm not feeling you all that well. I'm not enjoying you all that well. I don't know if anyone else can resonate with that experience, but parenting can be harsh. However, I'm grateful that I've been on a journey that even before my children arrived, I've had people in my space. I've had experiences. I've gone on learning. Sometimes it's been academic learning. At other times it's been experiential learning, to work on shaping who I am, who we are. And so today, I'd like us to think about how we use our story. And as we think about that deeper, please check this video out with me from the organization of Heartlines, where I've worked for the last 7 years on this national campaign, talking about the power of our story, or as maybe some of you may know, what's your story? I apologize, I need to be made a co-host. Natalie, if you can please assist me with that so I can do a screen share again. And as they take us, as they allow me to co-host, is Natalie there? Thank you so much. And now I'll do the screen share. And let's go straight to this video that talks about, well, for me, it talks about the power of story. And I hope that this will also move us along as we think together. So it's not just about knowing people's names, but also being aware of their stories. I'm going to make sure sound's optimized, and there we go. Let's watch this together.
The world moves fast around us. Sometimes it feels like a blur. We pass each other and make judgments of each other constantly. You're doing it right now, seeing this woman across the street. We cross and recross, but rarely connect. We struggle to understand each other, so we don't trust each other. I know your name, but I don't know who you are. You know my name, but do you know my story? What if suspicion, fear, and prejudice were replaced by understanding, respect, love, and trust? What would help us see beyond our perceptions? Story. Our stories are what make us human. Stories have the power to overcome our perceptions, to show the heart of Christ's message for us to love one another. Sharing a story isn't hard. It's a simple human act, connecting us deeper to people we already know. Reach out, ask, invite, then listen. Truly listen. There's something beautiful waiting to be heard. Stories have the power to overcome our perceptions. They help us understand. Stories bring healing. Ask, listen, tell. It's our way of building our nation. Heartlines has developed resources to help you on this journey in your workplace, at your school, church, and in your home. These resources will empower you to build understanding, trust, and reconciliation through personal storytelling. Imagine if we were part of a powerful wave of change, one story at a time. We all have a story to tell. What's your story?
Thank you for watching that with me. Can you say to your neighbor right now, hey neighbor? Say hashtag, what's your story? And I like that to be anchoring with us, because I've seen this work across the country. We just came last week, and I would like to report this to you all at this conference. We were able to bring together 30 leaders from KwaZulu-Natal at the targeted area of Phoenix, Inanda, Ntuzuma, KwaMashu, and Umhlanga. From different race, from different class, from different gender, we brought people together at the African Enterprise venue and had an amazing time talking and dialoguing and working together around what can be our response in such a time as this. There's power in story. Brene Brown, and I paraphrase as I capture a snippet of her writings, will say to us, you either embrace your story or you stand outside your story and hustle for your worthiness. Whoever you are, wherever you come from, whatever description that you are known by, however people call you, whether they call you man or they call you woman, or they title and they say to you by your aesthetic look, I call you white, I call you black, I call you Indian, I call you colored. Whatever that they might look at you and decide to give you as a descriptor, today is our day to really think upon more than just the aesthetic values of who we are, but the human distinction and the dignity that we have, each and every one of us. And so part of us thinking together, of influencing communities positively toward healing and transformation, is that there's power in your story. But not only in your own story, in the stories of others. And so together we get that opportunity to reach out across the lines. When I've worked out who I am, understand where I come from, and explore my own story, then I get a chance to share it with other people. But also I have the opportunity to inquire with them, what's your story? Where are you at? And friends, I'm happy to say to you that across this country, while for some of us we might say we are in our worst of times, I can also say to you that we are in our best of times. And why? Because there's some of you just like you. Some people like you that are willing to go to the extra mile, that are willing to close the gaps between the I and the other. So there's power in our story. This next point that I'd like you to think about is, where is it that we are coming from? Let me cross again to a screen share with you all. and bring in to focus, hopefully, what will be another kind of learning insight that you can carry with you. But there's the question. Where are we working from? What location are we working from? How has my story impacted me that when people ask about who I am, and when I think about the work that I do in influencing communities toward healing and transformation, do they know my location? Am I aware of it, the place and space? I love carrying with me this proverbial that comes out of Ghana. And for some of us, we may know it as Sankofa. I think in Ghana, they would say it as Sankofa. But as you think about it, it's a mythical bird. And the story related to it is that this bird reminds people of this proverbial, that while you are standing in one place, in a certain place and time, we must be cognizant of where it is that we are coming from in order that we understand where we are at and to move us to where we'd like to be. So here I've got it with a hashtag, leading with our story, our past, present, and toward our equitable and just future. In this reality of time, of the best of times and the worst of times, as we influence communities toward healing and transformation, we bring along with us some of our past that is important. This is what Sankofa reminds us. But there are some things that we don't want to bring with us. There are some memories that I got to say, while the memory may linger, I want to let go of where it is located, where it is that it is coming from. But the fact is, will I always be aware of it? Yes. But does it have to live with me now? No. And when we think about the work of healing and transformation, this is important because there is and must be a healing of our memories. We can't take it away altogether, but the reality, I can't leave it all at one go. It possibly will live, but I need to decide how will my memories live with me. And in a country like ours, in a country where we have been disrupted by a system that regulated and ordered injustice, a country where we've seen a transition into democracy, but by and large, many of us can also say it's a struggling democracy. Not all is well with the democracy. And so how is it that we bring our memories with us? We need to be intentional about how we draw on our stories and then work out what we do with the memories that we have with us. In order so that we can lead with our stories, we are cognizant of our past. But as we come to our present, what kind of equitable future will we design? Seeking to know, understand, and be critically aware, place and space from whence we come. Many of you may have seen this picture move around on social media, but it is the picture of our country. And right here, you're looking at two locations, Santon and Alexandra. And Times, the news really made a big focus on this. And as you think and look upon this aerial picture, as you work in the work and the world of putting out messaging and writing and capturing stories that people will listen to and engage, we must be aware of these divides. And how then will we work to close the gaps that are there in these divides? So while we are not in the best of times, we must also declare that we are not in the worst of times. However, we must be aware that there are some realities, economic gaps that divide us, locations that divide us, the way that my area looks and your area looks. And how do we work in that ruckus and chaos of things? Here, Brené Brown speaks to us, and I've already quoted one piece of a storytelling, but let me read this to you all. Because true belonging only happens when we present our authentic, imperfect selves to the world, our sense of belonging can never be greater than our level of self-acceptance. Vulnerability sounds like truth and feels like courage. Friends, as I declare to you, I need to be truthful with you all that while I am an African of Indian heritage and ancestry, and some folk would say to you all that I'm an Indian in a South African context, The reality of my life is that when I become true, I start to acknowledge I'm a child who still has a mom and a dad. I'm a child and a father who has in-laws that are supporting me. I start to become true with my story. But the power of that is that when I'm able to be vulnerable, it might seem uncomfortable, but vulnerability has an angle for truth and can actually feel like our courage. There's some of us that in our context, we need not deny where it is that we grew up, what it is that we've inherited, or what it is that we don't have. There's a songwriter that would say it like this: what's that you have in your hand? I can use it if you're willing to lose it. Take the little you have and make it grand. The reality is that for some of us, we might have a lot. For others, we may not have as much. But with whatever it is that we have in our hands, how are we using it? Lastly, as we come to our close, I would like you to think about this reality of our messaging. And if we are to do the work of influencing communities positively, then there needs to be some messaging that is moving us in that way. I've enjoyed using the work of Susan Scott. She is an academic, yes, but also works in the corporate terrain. And I've utilized her work to cross with me into professional organizations when we are consulting, but also in my own church context where I work. I work at a uniting Reform church called Via Christi Community Church. And in that space, some folk will say that I'm a minister. And then I've also taken it with me into the work that I do with people in communities through Heartlines and Columba Leadership Trust with youth. So I'd like to present some of her thoughts to you today as we think about our messaging. Susan Scott puts out a framework for models of a conversation. So if you can please say with me, can we declare together fierce conversations? Can you say that with me? Fierce conversations. Think about having a bold conversation, a courageous conversation, a fierce conversation. Scott will talk to us about a model of IPTE, IPTE. And I have a screen share on that. So let me just show you the slide at this moment. And right here, Susan Scott speaks about the I, interrogate, that we need to interrogate our reality. When we're putting out our messaging, have we done the interrogation? Have we asked the questions of what this messaging is about? How will it go? How will it be received? Then she talks about provocation. Our communication, our messaging needs to push people along. And remember, I'm adapting from her model where she's working in a corporate terrain to the work that we do around building communities. But today we're further adapting it into ACMSA's conference with you all, that we provoke toward a certain move. Hopefully that it will be positive toward mobilization and efforts of growth and change. The T that Susan speaks about is tackle, and she talks about tackling challenges. Can you imagine our messaging that helps us tackle challenges? Yes, in our family spaces and in our workplaces, in our personal spaces, but also in our industry, in the media industry. Is your messaging helping to tackle challenges, or is your messaging constructed by, people's whims and fancies? Because sometimes if we're not cognizant of who we are, where we come from, and how our own minds are speaking to us, we can come up with some messaging that is not all that sharp and poignant and on point. Lastly, the E, Scott talks about enrich relationships. If we are to do the work, can you imagine a messaging in the media industry that is going to build us toward a future of enriching national relationships? Wherever it is that you're coming in from today across 3 venues in one event, we interrogate reality, we provoke learning, we tackle challenges and enrich relationships. Right out of there, imagine our messaging in and of itself provides us with fierce conversations that hopefully can bring healing and transformation. Now, many years ago, today, we must also be aware that it is Bishop Tutu's birthday. So we say happy birthday to Bishop Tutu on his 90th birthday. But a few years ago, I remember reading in his book, No Future Without Forgiveness, and Bishop Tutu was reflecting on our own South Africa. And he writes there that while we were celebrating our birth of our democracy, we somehow had not connected with the pain of our Rwandan brothers and sisters that were going through the time of genocide. 800,000 people died in Rwanda. In 1995, at an evangelical mission conference, people were celebrating Rwanda as the most evangelized country in Africa. Can you imagine? 1994 happens the Rwandan genocide. 1994 in South Africa, we have the birth of our democracy. Bishop Tutu in his book is questioning this. I'm telling you now that in 1995 at this mission conference in Minneapolis, Rwanda was being celebrated. And while people were like reflecting on the fact that Rwanda was an evangelized country, someone stood up and said, but hang on, you know, while we're celebrating this, this is the same Rwanda where people were massacred. Emmanuel Katangola in his book, A New Social Imagination, speaks about this event, and he says that the waters of baptism, where folk that were practicing if you like, the church discipline and spirituality of baptism as a sacrament, as a way to people's faith, that the waters of baptism didn't have enough might and power to overcome the bloodlines that divided people across lines of Hutu and Tutsi. And all of this affair of the Rwandan genocide, by and large, and I hope that this sticks with us and we remember it, was carried on a radio station where 24/7, 365, people were spewing out hate language, messaging that said to the other, you know, go out and know that if you don't take your revenge, those people are going to act out on you. All kinds of irregularity. This happened in a media messaging kind of world. As we think about it today, what are the metaphors that we can implore, that we can draw on? Can we draw on creative metaphors to combat with messaging that is leading us astray? Can we draw on metaphors and creative writing that would actually say to us, do we want to see walls or do we want to see bridges? As we think about it today in the media industry across South Africa, we all have an opportune time. Yes, it might be and seem to some of us it's the worst of times. But for some of us, if we're going to write that messaging and put in our work and go through the critical thinking and check in on our location and understand what it is that we're trying to construct, we can assume a beautiful messaging for a politics of hope instead of a politics of divide. Can our messaging paint a picture of a new social imagination? Today, wherever it is that you come from, dear friend, dear media industry professional, think about the pictures that our messaging paints. Well, here is actually a picture of a project that I worked on a few years ago called Hater South Africa. It's from Bethel University. I'm a graduate of this campus in St. Paul, Minneapolis. This is where I did some of my reconciliation studies. And right here, you have folk that are coming from different walks of life. I won't tell you who the person is, but in and amongst everyone here, you've got someone that in the States, they would call a facilities manager or janitor. And in and amongst these folk are doctors and PhDs and reverends, social workers, teachers, people from different distinctions of life. When we ran this project, we were intentional about putting out a project that would get folk to work together in a campus that when I had arrived in 2004, had active racism take place. I'd like us to become aware today that our vision, our hopes that we have in our hearts can paint a new picture of reality. As I close out with you, I'd like to bring you the poetic versing of Maya Angelou for this conference. So please enjoy this with me as we come to close.
If I think of my life as a class and what I've really learned, I've learned a few things. First, I'm aware that I'm a child of God. It's such an amazing understanding to think that the it, which made fleas and mountains and rivers and stars, made me. What I prayed for is humility, to know that there's something greater than I. Then I have to know that the brute, the bigot, and the batterer are all children of God, whether they know it or not. And I'm supposed to treat them accordingly. And it's hard, and I blow it all the time. Mongrel class of people. I'd like everybody to think of a statement by Terence. The statement is, I am a human being. Nothing human can be alien to me. If you can internalize the least portion of that, you will never be able to say of an act, a criminal act, or I couldn't do that. No matter how heinous the crime, if a human being did it, you have to say, I have in me all the components that are in her or in him. I intend to use my energies constructively as opposed to destructively. If you can do that about the negative, just think what you can do about the positive. If a human being dreams a great dream, dares to love somebody, if a human being dares to be Martin King or Mahatma Gandhi or Mother Teresa or Malcolm X, if a human being dares to be bigger than the condition into which she or he was born, it means so can you. And so you can try to stretch yourself. So you can internalize, homo sum, humani nihila me alienum puto. I am a human being. Nothing human can be alien to me. That's one thing I'm learning.
I love the beautiful poetic words of Maya Angelou. So you can stretch yourself to be the best that you can be through your organization, your work, in your families, in your churches, in your communities, at your radio stations, in the publications that you're writing. Stretch ourselves toward painting the pictures of a glorious future for our beloved South Africa, for all of our country people. And that, yes, we can see that it might not all be working well. But if there are people like us, just like you and me, who are willing to do the challenging work, we can continue to close the gaps between the I and the other. Healing and transformation is possible when we embrace our stories and start to reach out across the lines and do some story connecting and listening to one another. And then also sharing our resources, because part of stretching is, how do I make it work in my context, in my workplace? There are ideas that can come out of you that we can level the playing field, not just for an equality that says some are more equal than others, but for an equitability where justice can be true and real. Micah the prophet would say to us, each one of us knows what's required of us: to act justly, love mercy, and walk humbly with God. Thank you, everybody, and I hope you've enjoyed this message today from my home to you all. Thank you and God bless.
Wow. Thank you so much, Seth. Really appreciate that and the time that you made available to us. I think we've all been challenged on various levels and been encouraged at the same time. So thank you, Seth, to you and to everybody who helped to set that up and put it all together. So, ladies and gentlemen, we come now to the end of our plenary session, and the good thing is that the food is ready and waiting. I'm hoping Gauteng and KZN also have nice food like we've got here in Cape Town. We've really been blessed with a fantastic caterer just putting it all together so nicely for us. But how it's going to work now is we're going to take a break. You can get something to eat, you can get something to drink, and then at 11:30, the different venues will all be getting together and having a time of networking and talking through some of the things that Seth has highlighted. So yeah, we will be doing that. But before we go to that, just an opportunity, and we have been able to sort out the audio, I believe, an opportunity for each of the venues to ask a question. And I hope you've been thinking about a question that you'd perhaps like to pose to Seth. I'm not sure if the lovely folk in Gauteng, if there's somebody there that's got a question that they'd like to ask Seth, perhaps. I see somebody's getting up. Great. Okay, let's just see. There we go. Is that Sipho?
Yeah, it's me. Take out my mask. Hi, how's it, Jonathan? Good. Sorry, there's no question from this side. I think we're all clear and happy, so you can pass to the other venues.
Okay, great. Let's pass the ball. All right, KZN, they have had a wonderful time listening and watching from that side. So KwaZulu-Natal, it's your turn to ask a question if you'd like to ask Seth a question.
And Jonathan, come on, we got to go back to the Gautengelangers, man. They can't leave me hanging like that. Those are my people. No pressure, no pressure.
Dave, I see you there. Anybody got a question?
Okay, now we have a question.
I'm not sure. I may have to adjust this video. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, let's get Dave to ask his, then we will ask.
No, I think
Dave,
Sipho, I think you must go. Dave's just left.
Okay. There's some feedback. Yeah. There's someone with a question here. Actually, I've got two or one. Okay, one question. I'll ask Petros to ask the question himself, so that Sondela, come to us.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Petros.
Hi, I'm trying to find proper ways to word my question. But I want to ask, how are we able to pass our messages, share our stories beyond the racial tension which we currently see in South Africa? Most of them are provoked by politicians, and at times it's difficult as a presenter, as a content builder, to not take side. How do we stay relevant and be able to share our stories without taking side, especially when it comes to racial tension as we sit in our country? Thank you.
Thank you, Petros. Yes, I've made a note. How are we able to pass our messages and stories or share our stories beyond the racial tension in South Africa without taking sides? Did I do well there, Petros, in just saying your question back to you? Okay, cool. Is there another question that we want to take at the same time, or should I get on that, Jonathan?
I think you can get on that for us, Seth. That'll be great. Thank you.
Yeah, so as I speak to you here, I want to speak to you here about doing the work of reconciliation justice work, because staying neutral may not be what is required. Sometimes when there's injustice, you need to speak up. But one needs to explore how is it that we are exploring people's stories. And when we think about racial tensions, it is impacted by the backgrounds that people are coming from, what buttons are being pressed. So there's a practical exercise that we did around the unrest that happened in July. I presented to a radio station. I don't think they'll mind me saying their name, and I hope you all won't mind. But Good News radio station, I think some of you know them in KZN. I said, while we're not located here, but we know that we had to do the work, how do we continue these courageous conversations? This doesn't mean picking sides with, those that are the so-called looters or those that are anti the looters, but let's explore the stories that are happening there within. And if Senzi Bengo was with us, she was a part of the conversation with me, not the one that we had on Good News, but when we hosted a conversation via Zoom and then we broadcast it onto Facebook Live, Senzi Bengu, out of the community of Oakford near Verulam, she told about the reality that a day after the looting on the Saturday, it was like Christmas came early to town. And she said it was kind of a joyful sadness. She was sad because it took such an uncanny event to bring about laughter and smiling. And what was happening? People were just cooking and eating. So I think when we ask this, Petrus, how is it that I share my story or create content around the issues of racial tension? Racial tension is not a new thing in our country. But for many of us in the industries that we are, and it's not only your industry, if we go into corporate spaces, even if we talk about the work I do in the church, we don't want to even talk about these realities that people are already agitated by. And I'm not saying that we need to pick a side, but we can explore people's stories and let them share the truth. However, if someone is saying something to me in a communication broadcast, like for example, if I was on a show and I was being interviewed and they pushing a certain pulse, we can always bring them to this line of, well, where's the balance? Where's the center? And can that center hold? So two kind of images come to mind. The one is, you don't need to pick a side. But when justice is required and when the human dignity of people need to be upheld, they require for us to say, courageously, we would like to say something to you. So, and I think it's a fault of our system. When unrest takes place, like we've seen in July or insurrection, many formal organizations didn't put out a formal response. You might get it from Desmond Tutu, the Tutu Foundation. But it'd be lovely if more churches actually put out a response or more radio stations put out a response. We don't even quicken our footsteps to even working out a messaging that will allow people to understand that we are against this, but we understand that. And I hope that that lingo lands with us right now. We are against this, but we are understanding of that. And what am I saying? Even when we think about unrest and the insurrection that took place in our country and how we use our messaging, we can't run away from the fact that we do have people that are economically marginalized in our country. And also academically, and if I may call it learning-based. They may have learning from the streets, but not learning from critical thinking. People can just use any messaging. If you ask folk that are coming out of some activism work, it doesn't take you much to start a riot in South Africa or get people looting. So we got to join arms with folk that are going to say, how do we bring critical education? How can we use our messaging to bring critical messaging in a time like this? So I hope that gives us some kind of a start of place, Petrus, to consider how we put forward our messaging even in difficult moments.
Thank you. Thank you for that reply. That's really helpful. Thank you, Seth. KZN, are you there, KZN? Somebody from KZN got a question for us, perhaps? Dave, yeah.
Yeah. Can you hear me? I think actually that my question has pretty well been answered by the last one. But, what I see is that as Christians and Christian media, we kind of hide in our little boxes because it's more comfortable here. Whereas the problem is out there, and we tend to shut off everything out there, and we don't want to engage with it because it's just too bad. And I'm just wondering whether Seth has some answers, how we actually start sharing these stories to overcome that barrier. Thanks.
Thank you, Dave, and to KZN. Sorry, there's some echo. KZN is my home territory because that was where I was born, KwaZulu-Natal. And if I just think with you all as Christians, and this is what Dave put out, as Christians and Christian media, we hide in our boxes. And I really wanna explore this with us as those of us that will say we are faith industry people, we are inspired by the teachings of Jesus. We have a courageous faith. Being a Christian is not some walk in the park. Most of our faith historically through the church was the church grew through martyrdom. People died for their faith. Now, I'm not saying that you need to be taken to task or risk your business or lose your supporters, but for some of us, we need to stop hiding in those boxes that Dave just spoke about. As Christians and Christian media, we need to step outside those boxes and actually compete with other media colleagues that might be those that we would say who are not Christian or not faith-centered. And we need to actually stop shutting off from disengaging. I know that there were some Christian radio stations that didn't want to talk about the topic. Where boards that are on your boards, that are in and a part of your radio stations or managing your media, someone's going to have to state, hey, we need more courageous folk. I mean, many years ago when I worked for Youth for Christ, there were a lot of people that didn't want us to engage in and around the work of reconciliation and justice. I'm grateful for leaders that said, no, we're going to. Because somewhere, somehow, we are going to have to make a decision as Christians and Christian media professionals not to be found again standing on the wrong side of history. And I know that for some of us, our theologies might be conservative, but remember, your theologies are directed by people that might not be anchored to the rock and geared to the times. They might be stuck in dogma and doctrine. And if we think about our policies and our organizational cultures, who is stopping us from being courageous when we are required? I mean, if we think about the Esther language in such a time of as this, Sekunjalo, now is the time. There is a time where we could be stepping up with our design in our content, in our music. I mean, we have beautiful music in this country that could have been played throughout the last 3 months of unity projects, of reconciliation and justice, of music that brought people together. We could have interviewed people that can speak about justice and reconciliation. But people say, no, we're fatigued. In general, when we talk about issues of justice, or talk about issues of inclusion and diversity, people say, no, we're tired. And then they get all in a flurry when things happen like it happened in July. And I hope through the talk, I've explored with you that unrest was already in our country before July. So basically what we've been doing is been turning off our alerts to what's going on out in the world and just running business as usual. I think when we are courageous, you can see organizations like Youth for Christ that made an impact in my own life. I'm grateful that I'm a Christian from a tradition, even though it was an evangelical tradition in Youth for Christ, they were courageous. You don't only have to see me now operating with the Anglicans that I love. I think they've got a lot of heroes in the Anglican faith, like Bishop Tutu himself, and I can share with you many others. But when I found this, that YFC allowed our leaders to actually engage, and in fact, they didn't allow it. Some leaders had the courage and were willing to bear the brunt, to say, listen, we got to have this conversation. So I just want to say that it takes a risk. And for some of you out there, that if you've been sheltered, tucked away in a box, ducking away from actually speaking out and putting out content, even if you don't want to say something out and out, have people on your radio waves that will stimulate the conversation, that will provoke some learning, not just keep it business as usual, not keep ducking away. So I hope that is challenging us to get outside our boxes and actually embrace the conflict and not run away from the conflict.
Thank you. Thank you, Seth. And then a question from Cape Town, Vanda.
Seth, thank you for sharing your wisdom and your motivation this morning. I'm sure everybody can agree that it meant a lot. My question this morning is, we spoke about denominational building bridges between denominations as media, as well as the cultural bridges that we have to build. I'm concerned about the generational bridges that are not as strong as we might think, because we sit with a younger generation who are not always able to voice their wisdom and how they see the future. We sometimes see them as the ones who still have to learn a lot. And we forget that, we've learned our lessons from the past. They're looking at the future and they've got a lot of lessons to teach us. How do we give them the opportunity? How do we give them the voice that they should have, that we think we might be giving? And how do we build those bridges?
And your name?
I'm sorry, I'm Vanda.
Vanda, thank you. And that's out of Cape Town. So Vanda, if I just want to get that correct, we're talking about building the space with the generational bridges. Am I right? Is that good, Cape Town? So Cape Town's question is about the generational bridges. Yes, and in the diversity sphere, we must think about age diversity. We must think about generational diversity. We must think about, how people think, the neurological diversity that is in the room. And for some of you that are in the room, while you might be more mature of age, who of you would say, by show of hands, I'm more mature of age? Any more? Yeah, I see a few more mature of age folk right there. Any of you that would say, no, I'm just a youngin'? They said that I'm a new broom that sweeps clean. Can I see by show of hands? Oh, Petros, Petros, I think you are telling yourself your own stories, eh? Petros, you need to check that story. Petros says, no, I'm a new broom. The reason I'm drawing on these new answers in the way that I said that, your industry is not unlike the church or many other organizations that struggle to allow for inclusion of voices. I'm grateful for my partner and my friend and my wife, Marisha, because she keeps me on my toes around the reality of the voicing of women. It's important that we have women that are voicing in leadership, not just about age and category, but the reality that we do need women's voices in the workplace. And then also the fact that we need to see emerging voices come into our everyday work in life. And so when if we're using this metaphor of bridges, our organizations that might be having professionals that are between the age of 20 and 30, it doesn't cost us a lot of money or more time. But can you imagine, even when a board is meeting, and if you go to your boards of your organizations, and if you look and see, become unusually aware, what is the gender that dominates that board? What's the age category that dominates the board? What's the race that dominates those boards of our organizations? In our shows that we run, do we have a demographic representation of the people in our city? Who are our tech people? What internships are we creating if they've not been in the industry? How do we include those voices? So I just want to say to you all, and it's through one of my other mentors, Cecilia Williams, who would say, whose voices are not at the table? Howard Thurman will speak about it in this way. He would say to us, who are the people living with their backs against the wall? So for those of you that are maybe running a show, or you're a media industry owner, or you're on the board, or you're a manager, be aware of, how do I construct design teams, content building teams that are multicultural, multi-ethnic, multi-racial, and multi-generational. And when I said it's not only your industry, I see it in the church as well. I'm actually, I'm not that young now. Maybe when I was 20 years ago in my 20s. So now I'm in my fourth decade of life. And my children let me know, hey, Daddy, you're an old man. But I said, hey, you should see your granddad. You should see your granddad. But I also find that as I work in the church space, we have a lot of, the glass ceiling for some folk just keeps going higher. And it's not about the fact that we need to push people out, but we need to open up and have more open networks working systems so that voices of people can be included. But while I'm trying to get my own inclusion, I also got to be aware that I don't create as a leader in my 40s the system that I've had to fight for most of my career. I've had to knock at the doors. I've had to be an irregular guy that people would say, hey, why aren't you listening? Well, because I'm asking questions. And so I want to encourage us that in our media industry, it's going to help us shift the culture in general. But be aware of who are the voices that are not at the table, that are guiding your content. If you didn't check in with a teenager and you're putting out content for a teenager, you haven't done a focus group, then you haven't done your work. Are we listening to our teenagers? Are we listening to our young adults? If we're talking about a youth culture and young adults and we don't know what the club scene is like, or we haven't been informed by what's the new music and the dance stuff, because like David said, we tacked away into our Christian boxes, then we're going to have to come out and come out the shell, almost like a tortoise. Say, hello world, how you doing out there? But come out. And when we come out, we make sure that the places and the tables that we are at, that more people are included of the generational bridges that are required, as well as the gender bridges that are required, so that we are not shouted away and tucked away in our own Christian media boxes. Thank you. I hope that helps.
Thank you so much. We do have more questions, but I do believe we're running out of time just at this stage. But I'm sure.
Jonathan, I see Limpopo is here. Do we leave them out?
Limpopo?
Yes. You heard of,
no.
We leave them out. Okay.
No, thanks for bringing that to their attention, Seth. Thank you. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, this is where we just got to say thank you to Seth. I believe all of us have richly been challenged and encouraged, and I know that there are a couple of tummies grumbling here, so we're going to go for a meal. But I just want to say thank you from the bottom of our heart at ACM and all the organizations represented. Seth, thank you for your time this morning. Thank you for that amazing plenary, and we really appreciate what you've brought to the table today.
Thank you, everybody. God bless you. Have an awesome networking event from me and my family while we are on a holiday. I'm grateful to have honored this invite to be a part of you all. May you go forward and do your amazing work. And may I, if it's okay, can I share a word of prayer with you all, if that's okay?
Please, please.
Let's do that. Lord Jesus, I want to thank you today that your word speaks to us, even in the context of our everyday moments. I pray that for our dear friends, family, community, people that you have created, that we would embrace this identity of our stories and know that we are beloved. And as your beloved people, I pray that you give us the courage. I pray that you'd give us the boldness. I pray that you'd give us the critical thought and insight to use our influences in the Association of Christian Media in South Africa and all of the other organizations that are represented here, to really do well by our people. Help us to use the power of media to make a positive movement in our country, that we can see an equitable future for all who live in it, that we will see freedom, not just a fake kind of freedom, but real equality in our lifetime. Lord, help our Christian media colleagues and friends, bless their families, help us in our personal lives, help us to do the best that we can, to be the best that we can. And we pray this in your name and by your grace. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Sure. Thank you for that, Seth. Appreciate it so much. Thank you to Natalie for helping us with all the technical things and everybody at the different venues who made sure that it was running smoothly. I think we can give everybody a big round of applause. Look at that. Hey, look at that. Some creativity from KZN. Beautiful. Love it, love it, love it. So yeah, just a big round of applause and thank you to everybody who participated, who made it possible at the different venues. Thank you to everybody for traveling to your different venues. And from us as the board of ACM, we just want to say thank you. Enjoy the meal that you're going to have together and then enjoy the time of networking. Thank you so much.